We can hear you, strength 5. Morning, Mrs. Devika Cariapa. It's my honor to welcome you to the Armed Forces Veteran Officers Association meeting. And for not only it's an honor because you're going to speak to us, you are part of the Air Force family, which every time I hear a spouse from the Air Force family excelling, my heart and pride goes up, and we are really proud of you, Devika. I've read so much about you. We are proud that you have been recognized and you've been awarded. It's a pleasure to welcome you here, and also to welcome Group Captain Cariapa. There he is. Where is he now? He's disappeared. Oh, there he is. Group Captain. Morning, Carrie. He's from the 50th NDA. Joined the Air Force, flew Dakotas and transport aircraft, and then he commanded the Air Headquarters Comm Squadron, which flies the President and the Prime Minister and all the VIPs in his Boeing 737. He commanded a Dornier Squadron. Had a brilliant service career. After he hung up his boots, he's been flying commercial aviation. And now I understand he's an inspector into the DGCA. In the middle of playing golf, he inspects all these guys. So it's a pleasure to welcome you, Carrie. And
thank you so much, sir, and thank you to the whole group. It's an honor to be among all your esteemed veterans, and of course you personally also. Having had such interactions with you in Air Headquarters and then following you right up to Eastern Air Command. And, it's really a pleasure to connect with you again, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
And,
Thank
to
you.
all your members.
And Air Marshal Carrie was on the 28th LDMC. 28th LDMC, Devika and Carrie.
Hi, Carrie. How are you?
How are you both? Wonderful to see you both again.
These Air Force guys are so thrilled seeing you. Huh?
Harry.
Okay.
Good morning. How are you?
Sir.
That is so cool.
Now you'll be here.
So great. It's a great family gathering. Now we will switch to Devika's talk. I hand over to our secretary, Wing Commander Harshavardhan, who will introduce Devika and then on to her talk. Thank you, Devika.
Thank you. And I'll excuse myself then. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Vatasha. Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this morning Sunday Connect talk, where we have a special guest, Ms Devika Cariapa. A special good morning, Devika, to you from Chennai. And we look forward to a very, very interesting morning with all the knowledge that you're going to share with us. And ladies and gentlemen, before I hand over the proceedings to Devika, I will just give a small introduction about Devika for all of you. Devika Cariapa is an award-winning children's author, researcher, and speaker. She studied archaeology at the Deccan College, Pune, and was a research fellow at the Indira Gandhi National Center for Arts, New Delhi, where she headed the prehistoric rock art project. Devika uses lessons from archaeology to help people understand their roots, cultures, and background. In an era where archaeology is not everyone's cup of tea, she makes sure to fascinate us stories of the past, present, and the future. Her book, India Through Archaeology, Excavating History, published by the Tulika Publishers in 2017, has been awarded the Hindu Young World Good Books Award in 2018 and the Sahitya Academy's Bal Sahitya Puraskar in 2019. The book encourages children to explore a mine of stories from the Indian history through the lens of archaeology. She has traveled with scholars from all over the world to historical sites with focus on exploration, conservation, and cataloging of prehistoric rock art sites of India. She has made it our mission to spread awareness of our rich archaeological heritage, particularly among the young. When not interested in things historical, she battles the digital era with a collection of old fountain pens, antique maps, and large batches of homemade chocolate fudge. Well, ladies and gentlemen, she's also a proud Army daughter and an Air Force spouse. And with that, Devika, once again, welcome to this morning's show, and it's now all yours.
Thank you so much, Wing Commander and Air Marshal. I have to say, of all the interactions, meetings, sessions, addresses I've given, this is my greatest honor to address veteran officers of our Indian Armed Forces. It truly is an honor. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. And thank you so much for your warm welcome and that very extended bio that you've all done research on, obviously. Well, I wonder where that came from. But yes, so it is really my mission in life to spread the word of our fantastic archaeological heritage. And that's why I chose to write for children, because I feel you should start young. So much of the information you hear today, I'm quite sure many of you will be familiar with, but I just want to flip the information a little bit and approach it from an archaeologist's point of view. Who or what is an archaeologist? An archaeologist, to put very sort of a very basic definition of an archaeologist, is a scientist who studies how humans lived in the past through material remains that they've left behind. Those material remains might be artifacts or they might be features. Features are big things, big immovable things like a temple or a town or a building, something that you can't move. But artifacts are the small portable things that humans made or modified, used, and then left behind. Now, the problem with these artifacts is that the people who've made them are no longer there to explain what they were made for, what the purpose of those artifacts are. We're looking at things that are thousands and thousands of years old. So there's no context. No one can explain. They're probably in pieces. What are artifacts? They could be pieces of pottery. They could be bones that they've done some artistic work on. They could be vessels. They could be decorative objects. Even, if you're very lucky, fabric or, anything, garbage mostly. Things that people have used and just thrown away. What do they tell us? Pottery and vessels will tell you how they stored their grains, how they cooked their food. Bones and seeds can tell you what sort of diet they had. Fabrics, if you're lucky enough to find, would be what kind of clothes they wore, whether they knew the art of weaving or spinning, and so on. The archaeologist's challenge is a bit like a detective. You have to find clues in those artifacts because there's no one there to explain it to you. You have to find clues like a detective and put together this picture of the past. I'll show you what I mean. As I said, a lot of the information here, you've probably heard it before. It's probably things that you're familiar with in your study or reading of history. So I'm just going to switch over to share screen and you can tell me if you can see. Yes, I can.
That's visible. We can see your slides. Meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen, may I request everyone to kindly switch off your video, please.
Right. So it's excavating is, the archaeology is truly a wondrous subject. Oh, Air Commodore Jayarajan's screen is on.
Jairaj sir, kindly stop your share screen.
Okay, I'll do that.
Kindly go to the share screen button at the bottom, sir.
Yeah, I'm just looking.
Yeah, I get challenged by technology. I think I spent too much time in the past and I'm constantly doing things like this.
No, I think he has started it. He'll switch it off, then you can go back to yours.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
What Kumbudo Jayarajan can do is leave the meeting and re-log in.
Okay, sir, I'll do that.
We really got to stop share.
Is that okay, sir? No?
Yeah, it's okay. Devika, you can come back to the share screen once again.
I'll go back to share screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. So let's go back right to the beginning. Now, if I were to show you these, what would you think of them? If you happen to be walking along a dry riverbed and you saw something like this, what would be on your mind, or would anything be on your mind? Would you know if this was an artifact or it was simply a stone that was, it looks like a pebble by a river? Observe very carefully the edges of these stones. You can see that someone has carefully flaked away the edge to make a kind of a pointed edge, like a blade. In this pebble, you can see that the top has been flaked away very deliberately, probably with another stone, to make a sharp cutting edge. If you look at this beautiful stone, which is almost a stone tool, which is almost 1 million years old, not from India, I might add, look at the carefully worked edge. And a chill will run down your spine when you realize that this has been shaped by a human thousands and thousands of years ago in order to perhaps cut wood, or for someone to skin an animal, for some woman to make a warm wrap for herself out of a skinned animal. It has been worked by a human hand. And that tells you a story about that human who lived almost 1 million years ago. It's an amazing thought. Each time you look at an artifact, it's an amazing thought that a message has come to you from the past, that this is how my human ancestor lived and survived. Another artifact. What is this? It's a coin. It's of course on a very large scale, but I want to tell you about some very interesting people. They're called the Bactrian Greeks or the Indo-Greeks. There were two sets of people. And sometime around the 1st century of the BCE, what we learned in school as BC is now called BCE, before Common Era. So I'll use that term. That is more than 2,000 years ago. A bunch of very interesting people lived in the area which is now northern Afghanistan, bordering Tajikistan. They were Greek. In everything in their culture was Greek. They wore Greek clothes. They had Greek. Their cities were built Greek style. Their houses were Greek style. They worshipped Greek gods. They spoke and wrote in Greek. All their customs and their gods and goddesses were Greek. And yet, some of them were influenced by Vedic gods, Brahminical gods. Some of them, on their coins, they had Vedic gods, the early forms of Krishna and Balaram. One of them had even an early form of Lakshmi on their coin. At least one of them converted to Buddhism and was a serious practitioner and scholar of Buddhism. Now, how do we know all this about these people? Did they leave their cities? Did they excavate their cities that were left behind? Did we find any clues about their clothes or their weapons or how they fought or anything like that? We know absolutely nothing about them except from their coins. Bunches of coins were discovered belonging to these intriguing people, which told us that not only did they live in the extreme northwest of Afghanistan, They actually came down and captured Pataliputra and Mathura, and hence got influenced by the early Brahminical gods, what we call Hindu gods today, only through their coins. Now, how does a coin function as an artifact? If you look very closely at it, you see his face, you know his name, it's written on the obverse side of the coin, it's written in Greek. You see the kind of uniform that he's wearing, you see the horses that they probably went to battle on, you see their weapons. A source of information is flooding out from these coins. Based on the metal of the coin, you can tell what sort of economics functioned in that empire. Look at this. This is Demetrius, the founder of the Indo-Greek dynasty, the man who's supposed to have come down and captured Pataliputra and Mathura and ruled over there. He's wearing a very intriguing headdress, which is the scalp of an elephant. The elephant, foreigners in those days, was the symbol of India. So he's wearing that as a sort of a symbol of his capturing of Indian territory. He was very proud of the fact. And the obverse side, the reverse side of the coin, is a Greek god crowning himself. So you know what he thought about himself. But look at the beauty. I actually feel that I'm looking at a photograph of Demetrius. It's such high quality. So coins tell us so much. Out of the 42 Indo-Greek and Greco-Bactrian kings, we know of 30 only because of their coins. And we know that some of them, there was a mother-son combination, there were two rulers, two father-son combinations who ruled at the same time. All sorts of intriguing information has come only because of these artifacts. Right. This is another of the kings, and you know, you can tell from the quality of the metal sometimes. You see a deteriorating quality sometimes, and you realize that perhaps now the kingdom is on the wane. You know, he's not able to afford. I mean, this particular one is still okay. There are some that are very blurry and they have been overstamped by other rulers, which could mean that that king was defeated and his terrain taken over and his coins have been overstamped. It's his coins being overstamped. It could be a symbol that he's a defeated king. His territory has gone. So you see how a picture is being put together of a dynasty that ruled more than 2,000 years ago, influenced by India, melding with India. The king who converted to Buddhism had Buddhist symbols on the back of his coin. Some of them worshipped, as I said earlier, Vedic gods. They were imprinted on the backs of their coins. So very intriguing people. Please feel free if you, I don't know what the policy is in these talks, but if you do feel like interrupting with a question or you'd like to put it in the chat box for later, we can discuss anything.
So we have the question answers at the last.
At the last.
Note down the questions and yeah, so that there's no interruption.
Yeah. So now there's a civilization that we are all familiar with. I'm sure you'll all, like if I had to ask you and this was an open session, everyone would be calling out answers. What do you know about the Harappan civilization, the Indus Valley civilization? Everybody will say they were highly sophisticated people. They lived 4,000 years ago. They had well-planned cities. They had fantastic drainage in their houses. Every house had a bathroom and the bathroom drainage would go out into a central drain. They traded with Mesopotamia and the Persian Gulf states. They had beautiful trading objects. They had a script that is as yet undeciphered, but we do know that they sailed across the seas. They had strong trade connections. They had merchants from all over the world at that time visiting their cities. How do we know all this information? Because when an archaeologist excavated the site of Mohenjo-daro, this is what it looked like. What do you see? Do you see that vibrant city that lived 4,000 years ago? Do you see people crowding the streets? Do you see their drainage system? Do you see anything at all but a bunch of ruins? You don't, do you? You see this when you excavate. Something that has been left behind, and then you start looking and digging for artifacts, which are the clues to who those people are. Now, the interesting thing about the Harappan civilization, as it's now called, it's named after the first site that was excavated, which is Harappa, now in Pakistan, is that before they found these in the 1920s, before they found and excavated this, most historians were of the opinion that Indian history began sometime with the Vedic period, that groups of people speaking an Indo-Aryan language were coming across the Himalayas and settling in the Gangetic plain and making things for themselves. The moment Mohenjo-daro and Harappa were discovered and excavated, the entire history of India was put back by almost 2,000 years. And one of the oldest civilizations in the world was discovered by those archaeologists, pushing back India's history so far, all in one go. And this was what met them. This was the site that met them. Dig, dig, dig. This was one of the first clues as to how special this civilization was. If you look very carefully, you'll see a hint as to what I'm referring to. I'm actually referring to this brick. Harappa and Mohenjo-daro are 600 kilometers apart. But the bricks that they found in both the cities simultaneously were exactly alike, in exactly the same proportion of 4:2:1. And it was a strange thought that somebody, 600 kilometers in those days was a vast difference, but there was somebody there who was directing things, some authority that said, sorry, but everybody's going to make bricks in this way. This is the best, the most efficient way to make bricks, and baked so beautifully that they have survived for 4,000 plus years. So that was the first clue that they had come across something very special when they excavated. Then they started finding the artifacts, these tiny, beautifully worked seals with that undeciphered language. What did it tell them? It told them that these seals were actually used to press into wet clay when they wanted to seal bags of goods that they were going to load onto ships to take across for trade. So it's assumed that every merchant had a sort of a trademark seal. But look at the fine work on these seals. Undeciphered script. They had a script, they had a language. That means people, some people at least, were literate. They had craftspeople, they had trade. The beautiful pots, beautifully made, beautifully decorated. So sophisticated pottery, sophisticated art, and they stored and cooked in these, stored grains and cooked in these. And these very beautiful jewels. Unfortunately, the jewelry collection that I wanted to show you, a stunning collection of metal and bead jewelry from is a highly copyrighted photograph, so I can't show it to you because it's on a public forum. But I thought I'd just talk about these. These are in the National Museum. They loved jewelry and they made very beautiful jewelry. These are carnelian beads, highly coveted overseas. In fact, there's a king of Mesopotamia who's inscribed somewhere that the king is really fretting because his shipment of carnelian beads from Meluha has not arrived yet. These cost an arm and a leg. Each of these beads are said to have taken 8 days to make and polish, each of them. And in addition to these, there were other decorative pieces. You've seen the dancing girl, the figure of the dancing girl, where her arm is full of bangles. So they love to dress up. They dressed in ways that were very familiar to us now. Like some of the jewelry is familiar to most Indian women. You would still wear things like that. And a number of those beads came from, like they had lapis lazuli, which had to be brought from long distances. So they cared about how they looked. This, again, I think is a very familiar figure, sometimes called a priest king, sometimes called a prince, sometimes called a merchant prince. look how he looks important. That's the only thing I can say. He looks important because he's well groomed. He's got this nice trimmed beard, and he's wearing this some sort of a coronet kind of a thing tied around his forehead. He's got an armlet, probably made of some precious metal, and his very beautiful cloth that he's wearing across his shoulder, which could either be embroidered or block printed. Because in the area where he's been found, where this was discovered in Mohenjo-daro, in Sindh, they still have this form of block printing known as ajrak, which I think all the ladies will know at least, that we all have at least one ajrak item in our wardrobe even today. So special. And it shows that there were figures of authority. They were probably merchant kings or priest kings, because there's been no sign or evidence so far that they were people who indulged in a lot of warfare. They seem very peace-loving. They seem very prosperous. And it seemed that they were, ruled by a very tight kind of authority because of, as I said, the bricks and the trading situation that we've seen, the seals and so on. And they love to have fun because these are toys. They have lots and lots of toys that have emerged from Harappan cities. Now, you know, the Harappan cities have been excavated all over North India, right down to Gujarat in the west, including very special sites called Lothal and Dholavira. And a number of these little toys have come up, which mean they had these little pull-along carts, and they had this monkey that would, slid up and down on a string or a piece of wood. They had little squirrels eating nuts. They had a figure throwing, I think, probably the world's first frisbee. They had board games, and they had a terracotta versions of probably, again, the world's first dice. And if you see that dice, it is exactly like the dice we use today. The same kind of dice we use for our Monopoly games or Ludo games was there with them. So they loved fun as well. So here you have this picture of a people, vibrant, living people, all put together by these little artifacts that have emerged from the earth. Now, if I show you this, everybody knows who this belongs to. Probably the greatest Indian emperor, Ashoka. You know, that's the symbol of our nation, the chakras on our flag. And he made these fantastic pillars and rock edicts. And we all know the history of how he gave up warfare, his message of non-violence, which was used 23 centuries later by Mahatma Gandhi in our fight for independence. But a shocking fact is that till the 19th century, early 19th century, nobody had heard of the King Ashoka. There might have been a few scholars maybe Buddhist scholars in Sri Lanka who knew of his name, but other than them, nobody knew. There were these fantastic edicts, and there were these beautiful pillars with these lion capitals, but nobody knew what they said. The language was undeciphered until James Prinsep deciphered the Brahmi script in 1837. Once he deciphered it, he got the name Devanama Priyadasi, and they didn't know who this is till they found a reference to this King Ashoka Priyadasi in a Sri Lankan Buddhist manuscript in Sri Lanka. And then scholars who had been looking at these edicts and looking at these pillars and looking at the railings of those mysterious stupas that they had excavated for a few decades before 1837, they all started fitting into place like a jigsaw puzzle. And they said, oh, this is the king. This is the king they're talking about. This is the king who's made all these edicts going right the way up to Kandahar. A fabulously wealthy, powerful king who gives up everything for his Dhamma, and who gives up warfare and says non-violence is the way to go. And that's how the story of Ashoka came to be told, through just that one hardworking scholar who deciphered a script. Why had he been forgotten? Scholars believe that it has to do with the decline of Buddhism. A number of the places and important cities and important stupas and so on had fallen into neglect because Buddhism declined as a religion. So it's very easy to forget. It's not so hard. It's the work of the archaeologists is really cut out for them because people forget very easily. Now, this is one of my favorite sources of history. I'm sure you all recognize, it's called a Virakal or a hero stone. And it's basically, you can find it all over Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, going right up to the west. There are very intriguing ones in Goa and so on. It features a hero or a heroine because there are a number of hero stones dedicated to women. And in my book, this is actually a page from my book, I have compared it for the children to a comic book, except the comic strip reads from bottom to top. At the bottom, there is a hero who fights enemies of his village or his hometown, or there were usually cattle raiders, or they were, the king's armies coming to take over their lands or pay their taxes. And he fights them single-handed. You'll see him battling off multiple. And in the course of him defending his homestead, the hero or heroine dies. And his relatives then accompany him to heaven. And in heaven, you'll see that he's being greeted with great pomp and ceremony by the gods. Now, look, what is really intriguing about these is it tells the story of very ordinary people. It's not about kings and queens and important people that, sometimes historical records are guilty of just concentrating on the high and mighty. These are about ordinary men and women. There's a woman featured in one of them where she's avenging the death of her father, and she's sort of stabbing all these people who are supposed to have killed her father. And again, very interestingly, there are hero stones dedicated to pets, dogs. In 950 CE or so, in northern Karnataka, there was an inscription found of two very brave dogs called Loga and Talaga. And the master says, they were such brave hunters, they killed so many wild boar each, and then they died probably in a wild boar attack. There are other hero stones in Karnataka of brave dogs that have fought in war and then have died because, they were protecting their master against a wild boar attack. Loga and Talaga were depicted in a hero stone, which was found not far from that inscription. And archaeologists have been able to sort of speculate that they were probably the early forms of the hunting dogs that we have today called Chippipare and Kanni dogs. They're breeds that are now being revived, I think, to serve in the armed forces as well. So a very democratic look at history. You find the name of a dog. You find the necklace of some lady who lived 4,000 years ago. You find ordinary men and women turning into heroes and heroines simply by observing these artifacts, which I think is really the wonder of archaeology. I'll end with a slightly, it's like addressing the elephant in the room every time you talk about history and archaeology. That how does any of this matter? I'd like to quote one of my favorite authors. If you don't know where you've come from, then you don't know where you are. And if you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're going. Every one of us is a historical being. What has gone on in the past has shaped us today, right from the languages we speak, the clothes we wear, the decisions we make are informed by the past. So in order to make those decisions, you need to be informed by the past. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deepika. Thank you very much. Very, very interesting. And I think we've had real insight into archaeology. Now we start the question and answer sessions, and a few questions from my side first. Can I start with the questions?
Yes, I'm waiting anxiously.
Okay. Basically, archaeology is termed as a very dry subject. And I remember when I went to college in the early 70s, I really wonder if we had any university or college which would offer archaeology as a full-time course. So my question to you is that, how did you come about selecting archaeology as a subject of study and making it your profession?
As I said in this the ending of my little presentation, it was simply this, the interesting thought to me that we are all historical beings, and if we don't understand what has shaped us, then how will we be people who are able to take decisions for the future? And it was a sheer passion for understanding what has happened in the past. As somebody told me when I took up, it was not a very encouraged subject, encouraging a choice to have made when I made it also. A lot of people told me, oh, you're wasting time. Why don't you do the civil services and, things like that? Because it seems overtly to not serve any great purpose. But to my mind, a person who studies history makes a better person, regardless of which profession you choose. If you have understood what has shaped you, for instance, if you want to understand the problem in the Middle East, if you've not studied the Middle East, if you've not studied the history of the Middle East, then how will you make an informed decision on how to solve the problem? I could say that for a number of hotspots in India as well. So I strongly believe that every child should have a deep understanding of history and then move on to anything else that they like.
So you're basically self-motivated to pursue archaeology.
Self-motivated. My father was a historian turned army officer, so that was a great, encouragement. He was the person who really encouraged me to do it.
Great, great. Now just tell me now, if someone wants to pursue archaeology today as a full-time profession, what are the opportunities available and how paying is this profession?
Oh, well, that's a very sort of a sensitive subject, the paying part of it. But I'll tell you where the opportunities are. The opportunities are in the universities. Of course, a little bit biased, but the Deccan College in Pune is one of the most professional places to study archaeology, particularly if, as I did, you want to study prehistoric archaeology. The most respected professors worldwide teach there, and they do wonderful research and excavations and so on, Deccan College. The Baroda University, Mysore University, JNU has a faculty also of archaeology. Paying wise, I would say, of course, the archaeological survey is always there. But pay wise, I have to plead ignorance right now. I don't know what their pay scales are. I think they would compare with any government service, especially for the Archaeological Survey of India. But I would say also that motivation levels have to be very high for archaeology.
Okay. Now, your book, India Through Archaeology, Excavating History, is an award-winning book. Was this your first attempt at writing, or have you written any book before this? And the next question I have along with this is that, how did you conceive this idea of this particular book?
I have been writing for children for many years, but this is my first book. This is the book. It's very beautifully produced by Tulika, the publishers. They're in Chennai. And it tells the story of India through archaeological discoveries, some of which I've touched upon today. I wanted children to understand how archaeology works, but it goes right from prehistory till 1947, the discoveries and how the story of India has come to be told, And
Okay.
the second part of your question was about how did I conceive the book?
Yeah,
Or,
the idea.
so it's a lot of material to cover. It was very ambitious to cover the entire archaeological history of India. So I told it in chapters which were like stories.
Okay.
It's non-fiction, so there's no fiction in it at all. But what is, I would say, what is accessible about the book is for children is that it is highly illustrated. It's full of photographs, it's full of cartoons and little comic strips, and it's like an encyclopedia, but told in a very friendly, approachable, story-like format.
Yeah, and you said that this is your first attempt at writing a book, and it's very, very difficult for an author coming up with her first book or his first book to get a publisher, who would go along with you and publish the book. So, how did you convince Tulika to publish your book?
Tulika are fantastic. They are just they're just very, very open to innovation, and you'll see that their publications are in 8 or 9 languages. Most of their picture books are in 8 or 9 languages. So I had written some of these for a children's newspaper some years ago. And I sent some of those pieces to them. And I said, would you be interested? And they said, not only are we interested, we'd like to turn it into a very well-produced sort of encyclopedia-like book. Like you see publications that come from abroad are always very glossy and beautiful, and our children are sort of attracted to that. And they wanted to replicate something like that with a completely Indian context. It was a big risk on their part because it's a very expensive publication. If I show you some of the pages, I don't know if you can see it's full of maps, and you see illustrations like this.
Yeah, okay.
Beautifully done by the designers. It was a risk on their part, and the book itself is not cheap. It's 625 rupees. So it was a big risk on their part. And I took almost 2 years to write it. In fact, it was over 2 years. And it was a lot of it was my writing and putting in information in a very friendly way. And the rest of it was the designing. The design element was very vital because we wanted children to not think that this was a textbook. Because the moment a child thinks, oh my God, that's something I have to read, then they were not going to read it. They have to be attracted to it per se and look at the pictures and look at the cartoons and say, this is what I want to read it. So.
Okay, now, what's your plan for the future? Any more books in the offing?
I have more books. I have, in fact, yesterday evening was the book launch of my first picture book. But wow. After that, after the India Through Archaeology book, I have written another book for Tulika. It's called India Through People. It's about game changers who changed the way modern India thinks. They're men and women who were born after 1850, and they shaped India, right from Rabindranath Tagore to Rakhmabai. And I've chosen people from all walks of life, like C.K. Naidu, the cricketer, people who made a difference to the field they were in. Homi Baba, people like that, who changed the game in some way in India, whether they were fighting for social justice or they were fighting for, setting up our scientific institutions or sporting facilities. So that I've written an adaptation of William Dalrymple's book on the Kohinoor. I've adapted it for children. And as I said, my latest one was yesterday. It's a non-fiction picture book. It's called Uncle Nehru, Please Send an Elephant. It's about Nehru's elephant diplomacy. And it's meant for 8+-year-olds, full of illustrations.
Oh. Great. Okay, now one last question from my side before we take the questions in the chat box and from our audience. Now, how do you divide your time between writing, research, and as a mother, as a husband, with all the household work? How do you divide your time between all this?
I tell you, my biggest enemy is the rattling pots and pans in the kitchen. Because it's a very good question, and every housewife will tell you how distracting housework is, regardless of how well organized you are. I do get up very early in the morning. Sometimes if I'm really into a book, it will be 3:30 or 4 in the morning. And I will have to work for a consistent amount of time. especially because my books are very research heavy, and if I come out of that frame of mind and I'm distracted by the maid asking me something, or the children, luckily my children are a little more grown up now, so not so distracting, but it is difficult. There's no doubt about it. So I have to make these chunks of time where I know that nobody will come in, or there'll be no doorbell ringing or anything like that,
Okay. We have a question in the chat box for you. This is from Wing Commander A.N. Arun Kumar. The question is, what are the initial clues that culminate an excavation? What are the back-end lab work on the excavation items? Technology impact on this profession?
Oh, huge impact, technology. See, in the old days, there were these adventurers and treasure hunters and so on who stumbled upon places. Like, for instance, I was in central India. We were excavating a Copper Age site. And some villagers came across and they said, oh, this is what you're looking for. These kind of things. I've got plenty of that on my fields. Why don't you come and see? So our professors went across and they found an entire city under their sugarcane fields. City, when I say city, they assumed it was a city. So there is so much in India. You literally walk 2 steps and there will be something there. So exploration played a very big role a few decades ago. Now with technology, there's laser, there's remote sensing, there's aerial surveys. In fact, in Egypt, I think they've been making extensive use of aerial surveys to find that where they think vast potential is, because obviously funds are limited. And now even time is limited, because the way population is taking over land, it's a race against time. So the more technology that comes into it, the better. An archaeologist today is a scientist. Unlike in the old days where you had, you were a historian only, and then you studied archaeology. In Deccan College, for instance, there's a zoology, botany, paleontology, everything to do with science. They encourage science students to come because you are looking at a scientific survey of the past. So science plays a huge role, and a systematic excavation of the past is vital. So the way you go about your dig is a very, it's like drawing up to use the analogy of a veteran officers association, it's like a battle plan. You go in, you divide it into grids, you take out, and the laboratory works there. You have people in the bigger excavations, you have tents of various different types of scientists sitting and analyzing your material. And then it all comes together at the end when you're making your reports. I hope that answers.
Yes, definitely. Yes. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, any questions from anyone? Yeah, Wing Commander Ravi Shankar has got a question for you. Ravi, kindly unmute yourself. Next is Mangala ma'am. After that, there's Group Captain Mohandas.
Ma'am, this is regarding the Kiradi excavation. There's a lot of controversy when the excavation was underway. And it also said, as at least one school of thought talked about the Vaigai Valley civilization, even preceding that of Indus Valley civilization, predating even Harappan civilization. I'd like to know your take on this, ma'am.
The problem is that the reports have not come. So what they are speculating is based on 1 or 2 artifacts that they found, and some, I think, inscriptions with a particular kind of a script that they found. And so it is better always to wait for the full report. Now, I don't know, or maybe the midterm kind of a report that they come out with. Now, I am not aware of the reports if they have been published. And when I say published, I mean published in archaeological journals, not in the press. See, what happens is when they start, there's a lot of, emotions run high these days with archaeological ideas and so on. So it would be better to wait for an overall picture to emerge, be peer reviewed by archaeologists, and then come to conclusions, is what I would say. I hope that doesn't take too long.
Oh, yes, ma'am. In fact, I don't think archaeological report has been published as yet, because even just before forming this question, I was just going through Googling. They're all only press reports, and there are also, certain guesstimates made in terms of the number of years it precedes by 200 years or 300 years or whatever. So I don't suppose there is a conclusive archaeological report as yet. But then the light you threw on that in terms of having to wait for the report is very, very meaningful. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
The next question coming up for you is from Mangala ma'am. Mangala ma'am, kindly unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello, Devika. It's such a pleasure. Wonderful to see you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
I've literally been absorbed and enjoyed, and Tulika is one of my favorites. I gift children a lot of Tulika books. I don't know if you've heard of Lata Mani. She's my cousin. And okay, yeah. So, well, my question to you is, I'm basically into education. I'm a teacher and I do training. My concern is about the history that we project in our textbooks for children of India. I'm specifying India because we're talking about a lot about the Indian history. And if history as a subject should enable children to go back to their roots or to identify with what actually happened, and because of that, this is who I am, or that is why I behave in a certain way. And if that is really our intent, which to me as a teacher would be why I would teach history. And I want to ask you, is there any possibility of people like you getting involved with the actual making of a textbook for children of India? Is there such a hope and a scope possible with people like you who are so children oriented and who are leaning towards making things fun for children, making it interesting? I'm just thinking aloud that our textbooks are so dry. I've done the Sangam age with children. I'm not a history student at all. I'm a science, but I have passion for history and wanting to know my own lineage and why I am who I am. That's where I come from. And I'm in Kanchipuram, so I'm at the site of almost everything that's so old and so ancient, and it's wonderful. But I want to ask you, what do you think about this from the angle of education and what we give our children in the form of history?
So there are two aspects here. One is that, the NCERT textbooks,
yeah,
you've seen them, they're excellently done.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to say they're really well done. Now, how much of that is going to remain, I don't know, because they're now talking of revising and changing. And as I said, passions run high, political ideas will seep in. And the reason why I feel what you say is so important, that we influence our children to know and understand and analyze and critically think for themselves.
Yes.
Because nobody should be, you should not be able to influence anybody's mind. It should be based on evidence. And that is really my mission. So in the textbook space, I don't think I visualize I would feel that I'm better serving children in a fun space with a very rigorous research background, so that a child could pick up and say, okay, even this exists. And the challenge for me is to what I just mentioned, for a child to use his or her cognitive skills and say, no, I'm sorry, I am looking into this research. I am going to do, the research on this Virakal that I found. I want that child to see that temple, like you're living in a historical town, and see everything, not just the spectacular temple, the little things by the side, the little milestones that were made in the 1920s. That's also part of the history. So that awareness is what I would aim for. Once you get a historical sense as a child, or even as once you get a historical sense, no one can pull wool over your eyes. No.
True. Very true.
You're a scientist, so you know when your scientific brain is
very
working
true.
Based on evidence. So
yes, Devika, I understand. Yeah.
How lucky you are to live in
we are really fortunate to be living here right now. Yes. And another thing that came to my mind is Vinita. We met, Vartaman got us to meet with Vinita, who's into Krida, the games, right? Okay. And she's also researching in temples to find out these games that were played. And it's very interesting that we're continuously meeting women like you, people who are doing such interesting things. It's been lovely. Thank you so much, Devika.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's my privilege.
Great. Devika, we have a young girl in our audience for a change, and
Lovely. Yeah.
she's put something in the chat box. She says, Auntie, this is Tanvi Deepak. Can I share something? And well, Tanvi, kindly unmute yourself, please. Yes. Share with Auntie what you wanted to say.
My name is Tanvi. I'm 8 years old, and I fell in love with archaeology by researching on Google about Egypt. I saw all the beautiful features and all the gold and everything. I saw many YouTube videos about it. I got very inspired. And thank you for this lovely talk. I got very inspired by it.
Oh, thank you, Tanvi. You are the girl that I've written this book for.
Thank you.
So I hope you enjoy the book if you ever think of getting it, and that you enjoy looking around you and discovering the archaeology of India. It's as exciting as Egypt, I can tell you that.
Yes, Auntie, I will. I'll research about all the countries.
Yes, yes, absolutely. It's inspiring for me to meet you.
Okay. Now, Devika, there is a question. Where is Brigadier Jagannathan? Brigadier Jagannathan, sir, you wanted to ask a question? Sir, please unmute yourself, sir. Unmute yourself and ask the question to Devika. Please unmute, sir. We can't hear you.
In the meantime, can I ask a question?
1 minute, ma'am. Let's. Okay, Lalita, ma'am, you go ahead with your question.
Devika, wonderful hearing you, and thank you for inspiring so many kids and even adults like us. It's so nice that you took us back into archaeology, prehistoric times, and everything. But I just wanted to ask you, are you still there now with the Archaeological Survey of India? Are you still associated in any way? Are you into any more projects with them, or you totally stopped doing that?
I stopped that a few years ago, which is why I had the time to write this book.
Okay.
Otherwise, it would have never come about. Now I'm a full-time writer. I write full-time.
Okay, okay. But you're still inspiring children to, take up archaeology, and, if they would like to embark on a journey of some excavation at some site, I'm sure they're going to be totally motivated by your talk and your book.
Thank you so much. I mean, even if I don't motivate them to excavate or become archaeologists, I'd like to motivate them to, as I said, have a historical sense, to see and recognize that these are important and therefore they're worthy of saving. Like a lot of times you're just, bulldozing your heritage away. In modern India, you're just intent on building these high-tech cities with no reference or relevance for the past, So
true. Thank you so much. Thank you. We'll catch up again later.
Thank you. Lovely to see you both.
Thank you.
Devika, Brigadier Jagannathan is ready with his question. Sir, kindly go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask why there is so much of cold shoulder for Kiredi. Ravi has already asked that question, so that answer has also come.
There's so much of
cold shoulder on Kiredi investigation.
No, I don't think there's a cold shoulder. I think that they need to get, as I said, it's very important to scientifically excavate and then put out your excavation report. So until that excavation report, as I said, it's a very technical subject now. So before any conclusions are drawn, I think the report has to come out. And then we can make our conclusions,
Correct.
I think all archaeologists are very well qualified these days. So there will be no question of ignoring anything extra special or extra, something that makes someone feel that they are not as important. There's nothing like that. I think all should be seen with a very scientific mind.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Devika, the next question is coming from Mrs. Pramila Rajan. Pramila ma'am, kindly unmute yourself and ask a question. Chris sir, next question after this is yours.
Devika ma'am, it was fascinating to listen to you. Now, my question to you is on archaeology and with a special regard to the temples. You mentioned the hero stones. Now, were you associated with any of the temple archaeologists and any excavations connected to big temples in South India? Were you ever concerned with any of those?
I'm a prehistoric archaeologist. So my specialization was prehistoric art. So I really studied and researched in the field of prehistory before writing was invented. Temples typically fall under a category of historical archaeology, where you study, things like epigraphy and sculpture and so on. So I'm deeply interested in it, but I have never, as an archaeologist, taken up any of those kind of.
Would you suggest that archaeology, at least a little bit about what archaeology means, prehistoric, then the historical significance, should find a place in our modern history textbooks for children? Because unless we start early enough in school, our children will never come to the college and university state ready to plunge into something so unique and so wonderfully mysterious to delve into the past. Would you suggest that? Would you be able to put it across?
Such an ancient culture such as ours, it's a crime that children should not be more aware. Like I'm sure you've all had this experience when you go abroad and then you pay 20 pounds to get into this very sort of mediocre looking fort or something, and you're thinking, but I went free in India just the other day, that kind of a thing. But having said that, I've mentioned the NCERT textbooks before. They do tell children about archaeological sources in a very, very beautifully put. For textbooks, I'm very, of course, we see a non-fiction book that there are many non-fiction books, but I think more of these. This is my Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
You can hear me? Yes.
Yes.
I think my.
That was a little bit break.
Yes. So having said
It's
that,
fine.
I think
It's fine.
it's nice to supplement those kind of textbooks with non-fiction reading for children on the side. If they're interested, pick up something like, where it's presented in a fun sort of fashion, so that children don't feel, oh my God, not another thing to study. You do it in a very subtle and a very fun way that, maybe take them on trips, maybe show them, if you take them to a temple, show them only one side of the temple. Don't show them everything because they will soon lose interest. Show them one inscription and say, this is what Raja Chola wrote in that Brihadeshwara temple. Just imagine he wrote about these 400 dancing girls. Just that one thing, and it will trigger their imagination, and they will go back and do the research themselves.
Thank you.
I mean, Tanvi is here, she's done deep research on Egypt on her own, self-motivated through interest.
Very nice, very nice. Thank you so much.
Okay, Devika, next question is from Colonel Krishna Samsa. Krishna, kindly ask your question.
Ma'am, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
You showed some coins that were found in Afghanistan.
Yes.
They are metal coins.
Yes.
And so what are the metal used?
There were hordes of coins found. Hordes of coins, mostly found in Afghanistan. Some were found near Peshawar. Some were found near Mathura. A lot of them there were a number of gold coins, silver coins, and copper coins. It depended on the king who issued them or the queen who issued them, depending on their level of prosperity. There were thousands of them.
Now, these are pertaining to the Greek kings. In other words, the Greeks had trade relationship up to Afghanistan, and the traders must have exchanged it for whatever they purchased from Afghanistan. And therefore, the civilization of that period and the period of the Greeks, is there any correlations?
It's very interesting you asked, because these are not Hellenistic Greeks. They haven't come from Greece. but they were settled, the Bactrian Greeks in the area now known as Bactria, northern Afghanistan, had been there even before Alexander came. See, they had been settled, they had gone from Persia. It was said that the Persian king sort of moved them out and told them, now you go out east. And groups of them came and settled there. And when Alexander came, he was surprised to find these Greek-style settlements already there. He thought he was the first Greek. So Bactrian Greeks were there from very ancient times, but these Greco-Bactrians and Indo-Greeks I'm talking about are post-Alexander. They had the legacy of the Bactrian Greeks. They did not have a direct connection to Greece itself for centuries, but they retained their Greek culture. As I showed you, their costumes and their beliefs and language and everything was Greek. So they were very interesting. And once they came conquering Indian territories, they were highly influenced by Indian art and Indian gods and goddesses and so on. So they had a very good connect with India, but these were not the Hellenistic Greeks coming from Greece, the way Alexander came.
Ma'am, you said that you've got an army background. Am I too inquisitive to ask your father's name?
My father's name is Lieutenant General B.C. Nanda.
Oh, my God, I know your dad. Salutes to you.
Oh, gosh. Thank you very much.
Our regiment, am I correct?
Yes, absolutely. Did you serve with him?
Yes, I did. That's why I saluted you.
Oh, I wish I deserved that salute, but it's a pleasure to meet you. Pleasure.
Wonderful. From BC Nanda to Cariapa now. Wonderful. I thought for a minute that Nanda Cariapa would be related to you, but you are.
He is also related to me. He's my
Nanda and I
father's.
are postmates.
Oh, really? He's my husband's second cousin, and my father's first cousin. So doubly related. I'm talking of Nanda Cariapa. So all these Cariapas are now like jumping out of the Zoom call.
I know. Quite right. Wonderful having talked to you, and such a pleasure. You gave an illuminating talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And a salute again.
Thank you.
Okay, Devika, we have one more question. This is another youngster. He's a little bit older than Tanvi, I think. Uni, Skonada Uni Nair has got a question for you.
Hi, ma'am. The reason why I'm querying is a lot of things came out from different questions that came, and Tanvi was fortunate enough to see how you questioned the whole thing and got inspired. The problem, ma'am, I was fascinated by the whole talk, and my days went back to the Indiana Jones movies that I have seen. I have seen all of them. Okay, and it was such a glamorously done movie. I don't know if the field of archaeology is so glamorous.
I'm sorry to disillusion you.
No, that's exactly the reason why I'm asking you this question, ma'am. We deal with these students day in and day out, ma'am. We do various programs for them, and all of them only talk about engineering and or doctorate or MBA and going abroad or IT is. I don't see anyone talking about archaeology at all. How do you make this glamorous? How do you make this reach out to youngsters so that they can be as inspired as Tanvi?
You're an educator. Are you in the field of education? Or
I'm into training, ma'am. I train life skills. So.
Oh, yeah. So there is no way of making it glamorous in the way that Indiana Jones, unless every archaeologist looks like Harrison Ford, but that's not possible. But there is a way of exciting children by connecting the past and their present. In fact, if I may refer to, I've given a TEDx talk called Archaeology Doesn't Fly Planes, which I had made specifically for younger people to show. It was about overcoming odds, like I was very discouraged from taking up the field of archaeology because everyone said, but what do you do with archaeology? It doesn't fly planes. It doesn't. It's not going to perform an open heart surgery. So what is it for? So maybe some of the answers are in that TEDx talk. You might find it. I think you might find it on YouTube. Yeah, I have basically connected things from the past and made, it's not just for young people, it's for everybody. It's like I referred to Ashoka's nonviolence. What did it take for Mahatma Gandhi to pick out an idea that came from 23 centuries ago to make our nation what it is today? to fight that independence struggle with a principle that was propounded first 23 centuries ago. So you understand that you are a historical being, you have no choice. And then you see the beauty in that, the beauty of being a historical being. So I think if everybody really works very hard with imagination in the field of archaeology, then it becomes glamorous. The key word is imagination.
No, and probably we need to see you more on TEDx and YouTube and all that, ma'am. So probably.
As I said, I'm so much with my head in the past that a share screen makes me nervous. So I don't know about that.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Devika, I hope you don't mind if it's not getting late for you. We have still a couple of more questions.
No.
And Vinkuman Ravi Shankar has got one more question.
From there.
Ravi, kindly unmute yourself.
I can't ask questions.
Ma'am, my work took me to Egypt and I spent a long time of 7 months plus there and I visited almost all the sites there. One particular site, the Temple of Philae, it was in fact, I was extremely impressed with the way they have rebuilt the temple because originally it was on the site where the Aswan Dam catchment area was. So they had kind of dismantled the temple and they have recreated in a very safe place and high ground. Do we have any such projects in our archaeology in India, ma'am? I'm very, very curious to know because they have done a beautiful job and the originality of the site was just not lost at all. All of them are extremely very well catalogued and numbered and they have reconstructed all over again. And there is a small museum also just outside the temple itself where they just say what it was before and what it is today. So do we have any such projects in India, ma'am?
Yeah, in fact, I've written an article on this rescue archaeology. It's called rescue archaeology when something is threatened. We have Amravati, the stupa that was dismantled, and the Egyptians had the advantage that at a point they had a lot of American funding, so they had them, and they had the. I think that was a UNESCO program. So they had that. So they were able to do a fantastic job. But Amravati is there as a very interesting rescue archaeology project.
Oh, thank you, ma'am.
And quite well done, I think. At least in those days, what they knew and what they understood technically was very well done. I hope there are, more in the future that they will rescue before they tear it down to make malls or something like that.
Okay.
You never know. Population explosion.
Devika, Tanvi wants to ask you one more question. Tanvi, kindly unmute yourself better.
I'm researching about a particular king. His name is Tutankhamun. I know his little family tree. His mother's name is Nefertiti. His father's name is Akhenaten. He had 3 siblings, Anaxunamun and Metatron. And then he married his half sister Anaxunamun, and his mom was his stepmom. So his mom was also his mother-in-law, as he married his half sister. And his grandma's name was Tai, T-I-Y-E, and his grandfather's name was Yuya, I think.
Okay, so you've got the complete family tree at the tips of your fingers.
Yes.
So are you going to do a project on it?
Yeah, when I grow up. My family says, I search on Google and it says that Egypt is half cursed. So I plan to go there with a guide so that I don't get lost and get cursed.
No.
So,
Egypt is
I'm going to go.
You know what was cursed was when they opened up the tomb of Tutankhamun. It was one of the very few tombs in Egypt that had not been looted, because whenever these kings got buried, pharaohs got buried, they buried them with a lot of treasure. You've seen the treasures of Tutankhamun.
Yes.
Okay, you've seen what treasures there are. So Tutankhamun's tomb was one of the very few that was not. It had been so well disguised that tomb robbers from those days had not found it. So when it was found, Howard
Carter. In 1922.
They said, you are entering a cursed, it was a sort of a a way to put him off from excavating and opening it, because it was opening after Tutankhamun died. So they said he'll be cursed. And then, of course, you've read the story of how he fell ill and his family fortunes. And so they said that's why it's cursed. So Egypt is not cursed. You must go to Egypt.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to go there.
Good research. Yeah.
Okay. Deepika, in your study of all this prehistoric archaeology and things like that, have you come across anything related to aviation?
Aviation?
Yeah.
No. There's a lot of archaeology on seafaring. You know, there's a very strong side of seafaring in India. So there's very interesting information, including hero stones of seafaring expeditions and technology of building ships and so on. But aviation, that would be that'd be very exciting if there were such a thing.
Great. I think we have finished with all the questions from our audience.
Asha,
yes, sir.
Shobha wants to ask a question.
Yeah, please. Shobha ma'am, please ask your question.
She's answering the question. Harsha, can I ask a question, please?
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead, ma'am.
Yeah.
Devika's there.
Devika, thank you so much for a very insightful talk. Devika, my question is that you talked about
they've muted.
You talked about, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, you talked about the prehistoric excavations of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro and all, right? You would call it prehistoric, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And you placed it at 4000 BC.
No, it's 4,000 years old. These are actually called proto-historic sites. If I were to be technical, there is writing. Prehistoric is when there's absolutely no writing, no evidence of writing. These are called proto-historic sites because there is writing, but we don't know what it is. It's not deciphered. These are dated to about 2300 BC. So that makes it about 4,000 plus years old before the present time.
Yeah. So, but today there are guys like Nilesh Oak and all. They are placing Mahabharat war at 7,000 BC and Lord Rama at 12,000 BC, when I think the civilization was far more advanced than what we have seen in the Harappan excavations. So how do we correlate these timelines? Because it's pretty confusing, like excavations say 4,000 or no time. I don't know whether it will go beyond 12,000 BC. And here people like Nilesh Oak and Jeremy and somebody called Jeffrey and all saying that according to the scientific calculations and astronomy and things like that, Rama is placed at 12,000 BC and Krishna or the Mahabharat war at 7,000 BC. So that's my question. How do we work out these timelines between the two? Because they are at loggerheads and it's pretty confusing to the persons.
So I'll just talk as a person who studies archaeology, as an archaeologist would. Your entire premise, your entire hypothesis is Purana killer. He's frozen again. Okay, did I freeze for a moment? I lost every.
Yeah, we lost you in between.
Yeah. So I'll just go back to what I said. I will only talk as a person who studies archaeology, or as an archaeologist would view this. Everything that you do to study
We lost you again.
Again, yeah. I think think my hearing a little unstable. Yes. You can hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Shall I put it on my... my internet is a little unstable. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, now we can.
So basically everything in the Purana Killa, they have been digging for many years, looking for the palaces of the time of the Pandavas and Kauravas. Now they have not, after almost 2 decades of digging, they have not been able to find any concrete evidence of the palaces of the description that is there in the Mahabharata. You're now connecting epics with what is available on a archaeological site. And sometimes it is very, very rare that you find an event that you can excavate. That's why I call excavations very democratic, because you are finding evidence of people who've lived thousands of years ago. You're not finding evidence of particular people. So when you say that Rama is situated in the year 12,000, you have to produce some kind of evidence that convinces me, either an inscription or something to do with the material remains. As an archaeologist, I would demand material remains of that. So evidence, I think, is key when you're studying, when you're reading all these claims and counterclaims of who lived when and who lived where and so on. For instance, I was talking about the Indus Valley civilization. It pushed back India's history by 2,000 years. Till then, everyone thought India's history began with the coming of Indo-Aryan speaking tribes from Central Asia or so. But they pushed back that history based on concrete archaeological evidence. Similarly with this, any claim you make, I think, has to be backed by concrete evidence. So when you correlate, it has to be based on that. There was a very famous German archaeologist who said, Troy from the Iliad, the site of Helen of Troy and so on. He said, I am convinced it exists, and he did some work and he made a lot of money as a trader. And then he went across to Turkey, to a place called Hisarlik, and he dug 9 layers of, this was in the last century. So his methods were terrible, but he found what he called the treasures of Helen of Troy. Fabulous jewelry and everything that he says belonged to Helen of Troy. But he never really proved that that jewelry belonged to the Helen that we're talking about in the Iliad. So although for many decades people said, oh, Henrik Schliemann discovered Troy, now archaeologists have gone back to his evidence and said, actually, he didn't discover Troy. There is a city named Troy here, but we still have to excavate it and find any evidence that we have that links the events of the Iliad with that layer. So linking events, linking people has to be based on that very vital evidence that comes to you.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, anybody goes?
No.
Yeah, Pramila ma'am has raised her hand. Pramila ma'am, please ask. So what is one? Pramila ma'am wants to ask a question.
I was wondering, some years ago, National Geographic did an aerial survey and used some technological instruments to locate the submerged city of Dwaraka.
Yes, yes.
And it was featured in their magazine. I remember having, I don't know whether I still have the tissue, but but nobody could really dive down deep into the sea and get you the artifacts or whatever. But they seem to have located it through sonar and things like that. Now, according to them, it was positioned at about 7,000 to 8,000 BCE. So is that a correlation to answer Shobha's question about the veracity of the statement of having Krishna's time at 7,000 and Rama's time at 12? We don't have anything from 7 to 12 I'm sorry, there seems to be no work being done on probing those areas. But this Dwarka thing was publicized. So
yes, Dwarka they have underwater archaeologists who have been excavating and finding. But to connect, say, evidence of an individual, there is a buried city. They will date it. Now, assuming that they are correct and the date is 7,000 years BCE, where is the evidence that the individual existed?
yeah, I mean,
how would you find that? See, that is the challenge.
Yeah.
The individual who we are talking about, you need to find maybe an inscription, maybe a statue, maybe something that person existed in that city.
I suppose we are banking on the oral tradition of, the Vedas and whatever the stories are coming out, the mythology that has been woven into. We are probably relying on that to substantiate our argument. But
there's no harm in that. There's no harm in finding evidence in, say, the epics and so on about how people lived and so on. But it has to be backed for an archaeologist to come to a conclusion. It has to be backed with
I see your point of view there. I do. But I was just wondering whether there is something going on still at Dwarka.
I think there is Dwarka. They do have regular underwater, archaeologists going down and bringing up things, and there is a project still existing.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Devika,
Yes.
Devika, can I just, the point of asking this question was not to pinpoint Krishna or Rama, but the point is to say that a 4,000-year-old civilization, as we saw in Harappa, looked more primitive than perhaps Dwarka or the stories we heard about these older locations, like Dwarka is supposed to be, from what National Geographic has said, assumed to be 7,000. So cities existing before that. So it changes the face of history, actually, that civilizations about 3,000 years older than what we see at the moment have existed. So that is the, I mean, it looks like archaeology is still evolving and history is still evolving. And until we know actually with all our scientific things that we cannot and pinpoint the actual time and existence of these civilizations, it is very difficult to write history properly.
I think you write history based on the evidence that is available, and it should be, you should enable it and be open to revising it every time new evidence comes up. But the operative word, like for instance, I keep mentioning that Indus Valley, no one knew it was there. The idea of Ashoka, everyone had forgotten about him. Based on evidence, hard evidence, they were able to revise it. So perhaps if someone has said that these are the dates that we're giving for, based on what we read in the epics, when it comes about, when the evidence is presented, then you will be able to revise. But until then, your understanding of history is a scientific understanding based on the evidence available to you at this point in time. And historians and archaeologists working day and night to find more and to do more research and so on. I think that's the key really to history, to understanding history.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We have Ram. Well, Ram is here in the audience and he's raised his hand. Kindly introduce yourself, Ram. I think we're seeing you in this our veteran show for the first time, and then ask your question to Devika.
Okay, thank you. So actually, it's my third time. I'm a member of the Colors of Glory Foundation.
Okay.
And I'm interested in history, but I'm an amateur. So I read all that comes up my way. I read an article recently published in the media about excavations in Adichanallur. And what was interesting, ma'am, is that archaeologists dated that to be around 1500 BCE. And they said that that period was the Iron Age period. Now, when we refer to common sites like Wikipedia, which talks about the Harappan civilization, They put that at around 3500 BC or something like that, but they call that the Bronze Age period. Now, from my school, high school studying of history, I kind of believe that Iron Age came before the Bronze Age. So if Iron Age in Tamil Nadu was somewhere around 1500 BCE, and Bronze Age in Northwest India was around 3500 BCE, isn't there something odd over there?
There are two things to address here. One is that Bronze Age, Copper Age, Bronze Age were earlier than what was thought to be the Iron Age. And when I say thought to be the Iron Age, it's, Iron Age, it was basically introducing iron implements into their repertoire. But currently, historians don't like to make those very strict divisions anymore. Like, for instance, in my book, I have a chapter on the megaliths, megaliths of India, a lot of them based in the south. At one time, they thought that it was called an Iron Age culture. At one time, they said, oh, all the people from the Iron Age used to make megaliths to bury their dead. You see? So yes. Now they don't say that anymore, because people with various different types of repertoire in their tools were making megaliths. So that whole, division of copper, bronze, iron, and all is very fluid. It's very fluid because various, like today, now we're looking at hunter-gatherers who still exist in the Andamans and so on. There are still primitive hunter-gatherers. So they can't be compartmentalized into various divisions. Like this is when the Bronze Age ended and the Iron Age started, or so on. So I think it's better to look at their material culture and say, oh, okay, they knew the use of iron, they knew the use of copper, and so on. I think that's a more useful way, let's say, to go about it.
Okay. Thank you.
I hope that answers your doubt.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's confusing, ma'am, because you're saying of 1500 years BCE, and you call it Iron Age, and there you say 3500 years BCE, and you call it Bronze Age. So somewhere the school book history didn't quite add up. So
yeah, a lot of stuff from school is revised. A lot of stuff, even stuff that we studied is sometimes, it's just like, which is good, which means that archaeologists and historians are doing their work and really researching and bringing out new material, Yes. We never studied the history of the common people. We never studied movements of, say, laborers and people who were not the elite. Like we tended in school to study about kings and lords and battles, and it was all about dates and so on, where history got a bad name basically because everyone thought it's so dull. It's only dates and repetitions of names. But now what they study is much more interesting. They tell you about agricultural workers and merchants and the kind of trading situation that was there between especially peninsular India, both east and west, and very interesting studies. Very, very interesting studies. There's a lot to read nowadays.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, Devika, I think we have finished the question. Oh, yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Devika, we are very proud of what we have inherited. We are fortunate that there is so much in our country. But we don't look after it. The manner in which the ASI does it is at times very pathetic. In fact, you see better technology hundreds of years ago, and we use poor technology to look after and maintain. And when we travel the world, there's hardly anything on that site, but the way it is preserved and presented, it looks as if it is the ultimate discovery. So there is something which the ASI needs to do to make sure we continue to preserve our heritage.
I think the operative word, I used it earlier, is imagination and a genuine love and understanding of your history is required. And that is really what I feel is my mission, because if you tell, like you look at Tanvi and she genuinely, and she will never let anything in India be destroyed or, or overlooked or anything. So the more people that come into the archaeological survey or the institutes like Deccan College and so on that are responsible for these kind of places, who genuinely love and have the imagination to preserve and to present it. Sometimes I think archaeologists live in worlds where the academics don't translate into what common people would enjoy, because they're operating at a very high academic level. It's very dry. It's very difficult to understand what they have. It is a very dry subject. So I wouldn't very offhand encourage children, say, oh, you must become an archaeologist. It is a very dry subject. And what you see, say in National Geographic or something, is the work of 30 years of one person in one article. And it sounds so exciting, but actually the hard labor that has gone behind it is missing in that article. But you need to have an intermediary between the academics and the ASI and the people who are looking at these brilliant buildings and excavations and all that. A very valid kind of an intermediary, a valid person who has studied archaeology and is there to interpret that in an interesting way to the general public. And then only you'll have what they have abroad. You know, those wonderful explanations of everything, and you know, where you don't mind paying the money for their maintenance.
Absolutely.
But in India, the problem is that there is a large population that can't afford to pay. For instance, if you charged Indians to Taj Mahal, it would be a travesty. So many people come, you know, they can't afford that. So you have to find some sort of a media. But awareness, I think, is the key.
Is it also funding? Is the ASI not funded?
I think the ASI is always underfunded, always been underfunded because of the level of stuff that is oozing out of the ground in India. It can never catch up because there is so much in India, so much. There are very dedicated ASI officers and so on, but how much can they? It would be nice to have these public-private partnerships with the ASI and so, but I don't know how that works. I'm not aware of the rules of how those work in the archaeological space.
You know, I think the issue is anything that is excavated and its archaeological interest, it belongs to the government of India. So you lose your land as well, isn't it? If I have a private land and you excavate something, the land is gone. It belongs to the government of India. And then we get tied in knots that it cannot be privatized and you cannot let anybody else look after that heritage.
Yes.
I think that's the problem.
They can't cope. Look at Tamil Nadu, the state is just so full. Everywhere you turn, you just throw a stone and you'll find a heritage something. How can they cope? How can they cope with the manpower? So they have to rethink, I think, how to, as I said, maybe public-private or allowing private citizens to part maintain it. Or it requires an act of imagination, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Devika, I think we are done and dusted with all the questions from the audience, from the chat box, and I think there's on the YouTube also. So first of all, my sincere thanks to you for having spared so much of time this morning. I think even the question and answer session has gone on to nearly an hour. And you've really spared us about an hour and 35 minutes less this morning. And very happy that you enlightened us with so much of information about archaeology, about which I'm sure many of us were just not aware at all. Okay, so thank you once again on behalf of the Veterans Association, and look forward to meeting you whenever you come down to Chennai next. And now I hand it over to M. Ashwathaman sir to wind up this morning's talk show, sir.
I just want to thank you all very much, and also to remind you all to support all these NGOs that are working in the heritage space. I saw someone mentioning Aga Khan Foundation. There's also INTAC. So that could be our little contribution. Very reliable sort of NGOs that work in this space. You could perhaps support them. Thank you so much.
Yes, we will do that, Devika. And the very first thing I'm going to do is buy your book.
Thank you. I'm very flattered.
Yes.
In fact, the second edition is coming out this month.
Okay.
So, you know, you might have to wait a few days. It's on Amazon, it shows not available, but the second edition is coming out shortly. We're just reprinting. Second reprint is coming out.
Right. May it go for n number of reprints.
Thank you. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
And Devika, what an very interesting morning today, and you really got us thinking. And there are so many things that, frankly, at least I did not know, and many of us will not know. Thank you very much, and you made us much more prouder, and the way you covered and you made a lot of army guys very happy out here. And the Air Force guys, of course, were cheering the moment it started.
It's actually been my honor to meet you all and to have this session with you all. It has really been my honor. Thank you for inviting me.
And I must tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that I asked, I requested Devika 3 months ago, and Devika, of course, would not pick up the phone, and her secretary, Carrie, would pick up the phone. He says, hey, listen, I cannot disturb her. She's writing 2 books at a time. And I'm so very happy one of them is launched, and I'm sure the other one will come very soon.
Oh, yeah.
And the moment she finished writing her first book,
yeah.
She got back to us. Are you still interested in hearing me talk? And so we are so fortunate that we had you to talk to us today. And congratulations on the book launch yesterday. May it be better than the earlier ones. And may the other one come into print very soon. You have a great fan following among us veterans here, and I know that you come to the Hindu Lit Festival every year. We look forward to meeting you this year. I think it happens around I think October, November. November. So we look forward to hosting you at that time and meeting you. Thank you, Devika. Our very best wishes, and you made us very proud today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's been my privilege. Thank you for having me.
Our honor. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.